Sir,
Yeah.
with regard to the assignment, I think we'll need an extension for that because we're all having the same problems with it.
Yes, I pleaded as best I could, but yeah, answer is no. Sorry. So no extension. But so yeah, what you can do is request a personal extension, but you only have one in the semester, so you have to think carefully before.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Personally, I thought it would make sense, but yeah, I'm not the one who decides.
So are we going to finish chapter 7 today?
Yeah, of course. Yes. Yes. And maybe even hopefully start 8. We'll see. I don't know. It's out of my control. All right, let's start. Hopefully some more people will connect later. So yeah, today we finish chapter 7. As I just said, I thought it was a good idea to just postpone the assignment at the lab 7 by a few days. But yeah, so it turns out that's not possible. So yeah, things are as they are. But for those who still haven't requested a personal extension, so you can request one for during the semester. So if you think that you're going to be good and always do the labs in time, then you can request your extension for lab 7. That would work. All right, so yeah, today we finished 7, maybe start 8. That's the thing with this class. There is so much material we have to, I feel, almost run all the time, and we don't have time to dig deeper into what we're discussing. But yeah, if you encounter issues with then the exercises or the labs, then you can come to office hours and discuss them. Okay. And I don't know when the grades are going to be available. Okay, so here we were. So we just discussed this concept, which was total product, the total amount produced during the given period. Average product is the total product divided by the amount of one of the input we are using. So it's maybe, for instance, yeah, the example I gave you is on average, a worker at McDonald's produces 1 Big Mac a minute. So the production of McDonald's is a certain number of Big Macs, and McDonald's employs a certain number of workers. So that's one concept. And then the other concept that we're going to be seeing a lot is the marginal product. So the marginal product is the change in total output as a result of using one more unit of a variable factor. So we write it this way. MP, marginal product, is delta, so the change, the increase in total output. So F, for instance, F of L and K, for instance, divided by the increase in L. So if we go back to our analogy, so this would be if McDonald's employs an additional worker. How many Big Macs? Will be produced. So that's the last, so it really average is for my average staff, and then marginal is at the margin. So given the size of the McDonald's right now, if I was to ask myself, should I employ some other person, what would be the outcome on my total production? So the increase in total production divided by the increase in labor. So if it's one extra worker, so it's just the increase in total production. All right. Yeah. So we get to this this thing here, which is a summary of everything we've talked so far. So what is this? That's the total product given the quantity of labor I have. So let me increase this resilient. So what does that mean? Well, if I have 0 worker, I produce 0. And if I have 1 more worker, I produce not very much, like 3, and then 2 workers, I produce 7. Then 3 workers, I produce 13. Then you see that it's picking up there. So what's happening there? So what we would say is that this curve here is convex compared to the origin, and basically it means that here the more workers I employ, the more productive my whole staff is, because it's curving upwards. And then until that point, and then it starts curving downwards there. So can somebody explain this phenomenon there? So again, what you have to think about is what's going on inside a McDonald's, for instance, if we're talking about McDonald's. Why would the increase in production be slow initially and then be quick and then be slow again if I increase the amount of labor I'm using?
Could one reason for why it becomes slow again be that they're just getting in each other's way since there's not enough like utilities?
Yes, exactly. So here, so what we can say is too many employees, not enough other equipment. Space, etc. So what this means here is you have diminishing returns at some point. So imagine we're just having a very simple. Yeah, so imagine we have a simple example, a restaurant with tables. It means if I have like 10 tables in my restaurant and I already have 200 people to staff these tables, and if I add another person, who cares? I should increase the size of my restaurant and add more tables so that people have something to work with. And what's going on in this region there?
Where in the middle?
In this region there.
Oh.
So in this first part of the curve.
There are not enough employee for the equipment, and there is, I don't know.
Yeah, it's No, you could say if I'm the first employee, I'm very, very productive because I can use the whole restaurant to work. But here's how I would put it. So why would we see this? So in this region, it means if I'm the first employee, then I have to do everything. So so I would say that here it's specialization. So that would be an interpretation. There might be others as to why this curve looks this way. This is not to say that it always looks the same. It depends on which firm I'm talking about, which restaurant I'm talking about. But this is a good bet of how things are looking. Why? Because initially, my first employee has to work in the kitchen, do the accounting, serve the tables, work as cashier, everything. Then if I have 2, 3, 4, 5 employees, then each of them can do their individual task very well, and the restaurant can run much more smoothly. So it's like what Ford did when he introduced this specialization of workers to a specific task for his car production. So that's what may be going on initially. And then here we just have too many employees. They don't have anything to do anymore. So eventually you may even say that if I stack 1,000 employees together, then it's just going to drop to 0, but we don't consider this part of the graph. We just say that production is always going to increase a slight tiny bit, but very little, because most of them are not going to be able to do much. And then here is what's happening. So look at this purple curve here. That's the marginal product. What is the marginal product? It's just the difference between output, say here, and output at one less employee. So the initial marginal product is 3, because I was producing 0 and now I produce 3, so the marginal product is 3. Now from 3 to 7, so it would be 4, but then what they are doing here is they're looking at the average of 3 to 4 and 4 to 0 to 3 and 3 to 7. So the average is 3.5. Then they're looking at their averages. So that's why it looks strange, but you could think it's 7 minus 3, then 13 minus 7, then 22 minus 13. It's roughly around this concept here. So it's total product divided by, this is average, sorry. It's increase in total product divided by increase in labor. And as you can see so this increase is larger and larger and larger so this place here means that part means that the more I increase the staff, then the better, the more productive the extra worker is. So this curve, this purple curve goes up. And then here I start hitting diminishing returns. So that's when my purple curve starts going down. So the extra workers are less and less and less productive. Now, what's happening with average product? Well, average product is how productive my staff is overall. And of course, the more I add productive workers, then the more average productivity increases. And then when I start adding less productive workers, then the productivity of the staff in general starts decreasing. So you may have noticed something very interesting there. It's that the marginal product crosses the average product at what looks like the maximum of the average product curve. So this is not a phenomenon that's specific to production, economy, or anything. Let me explain to you very briefly why this happens. So imagine you have a classroom, and I'm just computing your average grades. So imagine your average grades is 80%. And then I'm adding up to the class very smart students that have 95% grade. So then what is it doing to the average grade? Well, each extra very smart student that has a 95% grade pushes the average up. So that's why every time that the marginal product is above the average product, then the average product increases. And then once I run out of very smart student and I start adding up less good students, and I'm going to be nice. And so imagine they have 60%, for instance, then all of a sudden, what starts happening with the average grade? Well, if the average grade was like 85, and then I start adding students that have grades 60, 50, 40, well, what's it doing to the group average? Then it's decreasing it. So that's how you interpret this. All right, so the marginal product always crosses the average product at its minimum or max, or maximum there. Okay. All right. All right, so just to summarize what we just said, so this part of the curve here is diminishing returns. So it's what we define the law of diminishing returns. It may sound strange to say that we have laws in economics, something that we observe. So that's how they call it, law of diminishing returns. So it means that in the short run, if I keep all my other equipment, capital, workspace constant, then I cannot increase very much my output. At some point, I'm going to run out of things to do with my extra workers. So that's what we're saying there. Since the other factors are fixed, then I cannot increase a lot my output with each successive worker. So each extra unit of variable factor increases less and less because they don't have a lot of fixed factor to work with. All right. So this is just a summary of what we've said. So, when an additional worker's output raises the average product, it's when the marginal product exceeds the average product. So it's in this region there. So here the marginal product exceeds the average product, so average product increases. And then the reverse is true for the second part. So when an additional worker's output reduces the average product, and the marginal product is less than the average product. So it slopes upward here, and it slopes downwards there. Yeah, so it follows, as I said, that it intersects the curve at its maximum point. So examples of this, sport fishing. So the number of fish a person has decreases by the average number of and the average of work fish increases. Why? Because at some point you don't have a lot of things to work with, and there are fewer fishes that you can catch anyways. So pollution control. So if I want to control my pollution, and I can add one filter, and then I say, oh, it's not enough, let's add a second one and a third one. Well, if I have 10 filters and I put one other filter, it's not going to change much. So this is a general thing that we observe. Anytime you increase some flexible or variable input, at some point you cannot increase it forever. You hit diminishing returns. Portfolio diversification. So if I have just one stock in my portfolio and I add a second one, then it's going to be more diversified, and a third one more diversified. But at some point, 100 one, well, I'm just going to have an index stock for the average stock market. So it's impossible to diversify even more than that. Yeah. All right. So costs in the short run. So what we have here. So this is the product, what we've just seen so far. This is how much you produce by adding one extra unit of input. And now this is the other side of the coin, which is how much are you going to get in terms of cost increase if you want to increase your output by 1 unit. So what is the cost? Well, the cost is, for instance, the wage that you have to pay to your employees, or the rental cost you have to pay for your machines, for instance. And we divide this total cost into two. So the total cost is TC, is how much as a firm you pay to produce your output. And we divide this into two things. So total fixed cost. So this is what I cannot change in the short run. I'm still in the short run. And total variable cost is what I can change. So this would be something like, example, machines, rental. Because I have the machines, so I cannot adjust them. And then total variable cost, it would be, example, wage to workers. Yeah. So this is the total variable cost, so total wage to workers. And now average, what is the average? So let me.
I have a question. I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Which one is the one that that can be changed in the short run?
It's the variable cost. Variable means. Yeah.
Okay, and also you said the total cost is how much you're going to get in cost increase. Well, you said something at the beginning.
Total fixed cost, total variable cost. Yeah, so so it's total cost is how much my production costs me in terms of cost to inputs. So if I produce, I don't know, 100 cars today, so how much do I have to pay in terms of machine rental, electricity, wage, this kind of thing? So that's total cost.
Okay, so it's the production cost.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, thank you.
And then average. So be careful, because here we were talking about, when we were talking about average, this was divided by L. This was divided by so it was, for instance, average per worker. And now the average is not in terms of worker, but in terms of production. So how do I find these? Average total cost, average fixed cost, average variable costs. Well, they don't show it to you, but that's this. So it's this divided by by Q. So to find average total cost, you divide total cost by the production, Q. Total fixed cost is divided by Q is average fixed cost, and average variable cost is total variable cost divided by Q. So it's average over your whole production. So this is how you find it. So if my total cost is 10,000 and I produce 100, so the average total cost is 10,000 divided by 100. is total output. Right. And then we have the concept of marginal cost, which is similar to the concept of marginal product. Here, it's the increase in total cost resulting from the increasing output by 1 unit. Yeah, so how much do I have to pay if I want to increase my, so McDonald's analogy. How much will it cost to increase my output, my number of by 1 unit, my production. Extra Big Mac. So what is it going to be? Well, I'm in the short run, so the only thing I can do is hire an extra worker. So it's going to be similar as before. And we can already write it down. Yeah. So here it is. So imagine that my cost is for the only thing I can do is hire more workers. So if I have my cost for my total cost in wage is wage times the number of workers. So then my marginal cost would be cost. Wage multiplied by delta L divided by delta Y. So the wage rate of a worker multiplied by the number of workers I have to hire to increase a certain quantity by the Big Mac by 1. So you see that here, and what was the marginal product? It was the increase in quantity, or this I should use Q, sorry. Yeah. So the increase in quantity divided by the increase in worker is the marginal product. And here the marginal cost is sort of the reverse of the marginal product. All right. Yeah, and fixed costs do not change. Yeah, so this is what we're talking about is a variable input. So fixed costs like the cost of the McDonald's, then you cannot change it, so you cannot adjust it. So you always have to pay your rental for the place, no matter what. Okay, so maybe the more complicated graph that we're going to see. So let's see it in. So you might realize that it looks like the previous graph we had. Why? Because it's related to the fact that to increase the output, I have to increase the number of workers I have. And then workers are going to get more productive as I start hiring more of them, and then less productive. But you realize that here I said that marginal cost is wage time increase in labor divided by increase in production. And marginal product was the reverse. So here my curve looked like an S like this. So since now I'm looking at things in reverse, then my curve is going to look like an S like this, but in reverse, it's going to look like this and this. So this is just to show, to give you some idea of the relation between the two things. And why is that? So now let me again talk about what's going on there. So total fixed cost. So this is output, this is cost. So output is how much I produce. So imagine how much Big Macs I produce every hour, and how much it costs me to produce these Big Macs. Now, what is the total fixed cost there? Can somebody tell me what is this cost?
The total fixed cost?
Yeah.
Like what could be like, what is like equipment and all that thing, or it's not the question?
So what would you put into this total fixed cost? What kind of cost do you have there?
Oh, like maybe equipment,
Yes.
electricity, insurance, all that kind of thing.
Oh, wow. Insurance, I hadn't thought about it. I thought about it. Very good. Yeah, electricity, I'm not. So the thing is, if you say, oh, there are very few customers, so I have to run my machines less. So maybe you spend a bit less on electricity. So it's, but for lights and stuff like that, I agree with you. So insurance is very good. Yeah, rental in general. So this is something that if I produce 0 or if I produce 120, no matter what, I have to pay it. And now on top of that, what do I have? I have this additional cost there, which is the total variable cost. So what is this? It's, let's just say it's my employees. Wage. So this is the total variable cost. And this I can adjust, because if I have my restaurant full, then I can call people and say, come to work, come to work. I have a lot of work to do right now. And then what does that reflect there? Why is it increasing there and decreasing here? So it's the same idea, but in reverse. So can somebody have a shot at it? Like, why is this increasing fast and slowly, then fast again? No, I'm going to tell it. So it's the same idea as before. So it's first employees, not so productive, because they have to do everything around. So that's why I have to hire many people before, and it's, you know, if I want to produce 10 or 20, I have to hire a lot of initially people to staff my restaurant well. And then here what happens. So even if higher, let's other. Not so productive. So in this region there. So it means if my restaurant is made to produce 60 and I really want to produce 110, for instance, then I have to hire so many people. And at some point they start walking on each other's feet. And then if I say, no, but even it's not enough, I want 120, well, tough luck, even if you hire like 100 extra people, it's going to cost you a fortune, but it's going to be very hard to get to 120. So you see why this is it's the same story, is just in terms of cost rather than in terms of marginal product. So this is, and then what is the total cost? Well, the total cost is the addition of this total fixed cost and this total variable cost. So you get this total cost here, total cost curve. Now, what is the second graph here? Well, it's per unit, so divided by quantity, divided by output. So you divide these curves by the output here. And what do you get? So let's start with these two curves here. So average cost and total average, yeah. Let's start with that blue one, yeah. Average fixed cost. So why is the average fixed cost very, very high initially?
Because it's fixed cost, so even if you produce one product, you're still gonna pay like the whole like fixed cost.
Yeah, exactly. So you're following super well. So this is it's very infinite, almost infinite, for very low quantity. Because fixed cost divided by Q is large if Q is small. Yeah, so that's exactly what's going on there. I have to start like renting everything and buying the place, and then if I just produce one unit, then it's going to the cost per unit is astronomical. What is the average variable cost? Well, it depends on the number of workers I have. So it depends on the marginal cost. So initially the marginal cost is the same as the average variable cost, because if I start producing one unit, then what's the average cost for producing that unit? It's the same as the cost of producing that unit. But then what we see is that the marginal cost decreases. That's when my staff becomes more productive. So what happens to the average variable cost here? Well, it decreases because the more I hire people, then the more productive they are. So they lower the cost I have of producing it. But then the same thing happens at the minimum of the average variable cost. Then the marginal cost is crossing there. It means that when the marginal cost for producing an extra unit starts to increase a lot, that's when people start being very not productive because they run out of stuff. So then to produce one extra unit or 10 extra units from 110 to 120 costs me a fortune in terms of workers. So then my average costs here start increasing. So that's what's going on. All right. So this graph, there are a lot of things that are going on. So it might take a few moments to wrap your mind around it. But so always keep in mind that this is the flip side of what we were talking earlier of the average product, marginal product, this kind of thing. All right, so the average total curve is derived geometrically by vertically adding the average fixed cost and average. Oh yeah, so this there's a error there. Sorry about this. It's not average fixed cost and average fixed cost. Average variable cost. as we've seen. Average total cost declines initially as output increases, reaches a minimum, and then rises as output increases further. This is because initially people get more productive or more efficient at what they do. But then if I hire too many people, then they don't have anything to do. So the average total cost is U-shaped. So that's what we just saw there. Average total cost declines initially, but then if I just keep the restaurant as is and even hire more and more and more people, then it's just almost impossible at some point to produce. I can never produce 1,000 Big Macs in a restaurant that was meant to produce 100 Big Macs, even if I hire 1 million workers. So that's what it means. Yeah, so this is the same graph as before. Yeah. So each additional worker has the same amount of total cost. It's the wage. Their wage, W, but a different amount of total output. So eventually diminishing average product of the variable factor implies rising average variable cost. So that's what I was saying. If you add one productive worker, then the average variable cost doesn't increase a lot. If you add one unproductive worker, then the average variable cost increases a lot. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and the marginal cost reaches its minimum when the marginal project reaches its maximum. So I'm going to say that again. So variable cost. Yeah, so yeah, cost in terms of variable cost. It's wage times the number of employees I hire. So marginal cost is wage multiplied by increase in labor divided by increase in output. So if I want to increase my production by 1 unit, oh yeah, sometimes I use a Y. Yeah, by 1 unit, how many labor extra workers do I have to hire? That gives me my marginal cost there. So you see that, the minimum of marginal cost is when this is the smallest, and this is the smallest when marginal product, which is delta Q divided by delta L, reaches its maximum. So when delta Q divided by delta L is the biggest, then delta L divided by delta Q is the smallest. So you see that they're both the same concept going on, the same aspect of, if I look at it in terms of product or in terms of cost. All right. Capacity, finally. What is the capacity? So it's the sort of the ideal size of the restaurant. So when I built the restaurant, what did I think I would, how many customers did I think I would serve? Yeah, so that's what capacity is. So it's the level of output that corresponds to the minimum short-run average total cost. It's the best I can do. So if my restaurant is meant for 100 people, then I have an exact perfect number of employees for that size. I'm not stretching too much or stretching too little. Yeah, so it's the largest output can produce without encountering average Yeah, so I would say best ratio of to capital. Yeah, so if the a firm that is pushing at that output less than the point of minimum is said to have excess capacity. Oh yeah, okay. So too large for the production level. Firm. So if my restaurant has is meant to serve 100 people and I only have 10 customers, then it has excess capacity. Right, so that's not too complicated. All right, last point, shifts in the short run cost curves. So what happens when there's a shift in the price of a factor? Well, if it's a shift in the price of fixed cost, then yeah, it's going to just, what it means is, imagine the taxes that I have to pay to run this restaurant increases, then it's just going to shift the fixed cost up. And if it's a shift in the cost of a variable factor, so it's like a shift in wage. This is like in or rental cost. So how does that get reflected in the curve? So let's look at it. So this is an increase in the variable factor price. So it's just that, so there's an increase in wage, so that for every unit, then it's just going to shift my curve up, because again, my curve here is the cost reminder. So cost is W times L. So then at every point, if W increases, then average, yeah, going to variable cost. So if my variable cost W increases, then at every point it costs more to produce that output. So it's just going to shift my curves up. All right. And I think there's a last slide. Oh yeah. Last very interesting case. So I told you that these curves are not like universal laws. They depend on which sector I'm talking about, which firm I'm talking about. So here is an example of a firm where it's different. So what's going on there? You have average total cost, which was extremely high initially, which makes sense. It's the average investment. But where is the marginal cost? The marginal cost is always $1. And so since the marginal cost is always $1, then of course the average variable cost is the average of all these marginal costs. So it's also $1. What sort of firm would that be? Somebody have an example? No idea. What digital firm has a very, very high fixed cost, but then a very low marginal cost that is constant and never increases?
Apple.
Yeah. Could be, but it's complicated. So I'm going to give you my, or maybe there's somebody else who had a suggestion.
Maybe an online casino. They have to pay high fees to open up, but after that, it's basically just profit every minute.
Yes, perfect example. Any online business. It costs a lot to develop, but then each extra client costs almost zero, and that cost never increases. So of course it's not perfectly true, because you could say, yeah, but I have servers to run, but so these extra costs of having, say, one extra person playing in your online game is just so small compared to just managing the website and creating the game and the graphics and all this, that it really looks like this. It looks like the average total cost always decreases. So it's the best size you can have for your online casino is infinite. It's have everybody in the world play, because then you develop the game once and then you have so many customers that pay you. So that's why, so the optimal size to minimize average cost. Infinite. Infinite number of clients. All right. So that's it for chapter 7. Are there questions about what we've seen so far? I know we're going very fast. I'm sorry, I would like to spend more time discussing everything, but it's just we have to move on with the material. There's 8 and the appendix to 8 to see. So yeah.
Can you go back one slide just for 2 seconds?
Yeah.
Thanks.
So here what we have is wage times something. So if wage increases, then it's just going to shift everything up.
Sorry, I don't understand why in the previous slides it says that the ATC curve shifts, but the MC does not change, but after in the graph both change.
Okay, an increase. Yeah, okay, so that's, thanks so much for asking that. So this is linked to. Yeah, so this point there, these two both go together. So you're totally right. If we're talking about variable factors, then of course they shift upward. That's what we just saw here. So they shift upward. But if it's a fixed cost, then what that would do is that would shift average total cost up, but that wouldn't affect marginal costs. So the marginal cost would stay there, but total cost would shift up. And by the way, it would look very strange. It would look like this, for instance. So it would change the shape. Why? Because average total cost is a mix of marginal cost and fixed cost. So if there's only fixed cost that increases, then it matters a lot initially. But then as I increase the amount of workers I have to pay to, and their wage hasn't increased, then yeah, it's not going to affect too much my curve. So I think that's why they didn't want to show that, because it looks, yeah, it would be confusing. So, but this is very obvious to see. So the marginal cost would just shift upward, and the average total cost would just shift upward by the same amount. All right, so let's go to chapter 8. Okay, so what's going on there with the long run? So if I have to summarize, yeah. So short run, I inherit the firm from my dad, for instance. So its size is fixed. Then I choose how many people to hire. And then long run, what's going on? So I design everything. So it's planning for the next maybe. So of course, it's long run compared to shorter run. So it might be 10 years, 20 years, 5 years, who knows, it depends what we're talking about. But here I have this restaurant, and it's the size it is. And then the only thing I can choose is, okay, I'm going to hire 10 people to make it work. Here is, I'm designing the whole business. So I'm having this business plan for the long run. So I can say, oh, I'm going to have exactly 20 workers and 10 tables, for instance. And so I can pick the optimal size. And then, of course, maybe in 5 years, I'm going to regret my choice. I'm going to think, oh, that was too small, or that was too big, and I have to make up for it by choosing fewer workers or more workers. But now I'm going to plan ahead and I'm going to think, okay, what's the optimal size? What's the optimal amount of machines? What's the optimal amount of land to rent for my production? So that's, so I have much more freedom in my decision, all right? Yeah, so what we're going to see here is, how we decide how to minimize costs, basically based on how much I plan on producing, and how I choose between substitutes like capital and labor, for instance. So what's going on there? So in the short run, at least one factor is fixed. So like land or capital. In the long run, all inputs are variable, so I can choose everything. So there are numerous ways to produce any given output. I could choose a restaurant where I have a few tables and many waiters that tell people, okay, are you finished? Are you finished? Get out, get out, get out. Or I can have a restaurant with 100 tables and only 10 people that run around with these. And you could imagine that the two restaurants would produce the same output. So it's up to me to decide what is the optimal number of tables to have, what is the optimal size of the restaurant, what is the optimal number of waiters to hire. So of course the profit maximization the choice is to be efficient, so I'm going to pick the most efficient choice. And we're going to see that technical efficiency is when for a given number of inputs, so they are combined in such a way as to maximize the level of output. So this is a truism. So it's like saying, I'm a good manager. So given given a certain number, certain amount of input, I use them in the most productive way. So this is just saying that managers are not going to throw away stuff or make poor decisions. What we say is everybody is the best manager they can be, but then they still have to choose the best combination of inputs. But once they have it, then they are good at managing them. Might not always be the case, but that's what's going on there. And now, so technical efficiency is not enough for profits to be maximized, but because then what I have to imagine is what is the optimal size of my production? Should I seek to produce 100 meals or 1,000 meals or 10 meals? So it depends on the size of my market. It depends on the size of the exactly. So it depends on how much I want to produce, and then once I have decided that, then I'm going to choose the lowest cost combination of labor and capital to produce this amount. So that's what we're going to see here.
Professor?
Yeah.
Could you go back on the slides real quick?
Yeah. Oh, this was not.
It was the one before. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, okay, so what this saying there is, what I'm going to do essentially is decide, okay, this is the amount I want to produce, and given that that amount, then what is the best combination of capital and labor, for instance, to be producing that that amount. And if it was possible to substitute one factor for another and keep the output constant while reducing total cost, then obviously I would do it. So if I say, oh, I can produce 10, but instead of having 10 workers and 10 machines, I could have 9 workers and 11 machines, and it could cost me less, then of course I would do it. So so this is what it means to minimize cost. Is I choose the level of production I like, and then once I have chosen that, then I pick the best combination of factors possible to achieve that. Right? And this is what we're going to see in the appendix. Is going to, here is just description of what's going on. But once we see the appendix of chapter 8, we can see much more clearly what's going on with that. Yeah. So, but right away, what we can look is something that is very similar to what we've seen for the consumer. So let's just write this down. So reminder for consumer. We had that marginal product, marginal utility divided by marginal cost by price had to be equal between different goods for utility maximization. Here, same idea. So what do we have here is that the marginal product divided by the cost should be equal. So that's what happens at the cost minimization. So it's if you you're reminded of the consumer case, it's exactly the same. So imagine that I could so if I can decide to hire one extra worker or buy one extra machine. That extra workers cost me like 20. So and is going to produce 10 Big Macs. So I'm going to get 10 Big Macs divided by 20. If I, rather than that, add an extra, I don't know, machine to an extra, yeah, so whatever you use to, an extra stove maybe to cook the Big Macs in. So what is the extra product of this stove? It might be 200, it might be much more, but if this stove costs me 2,000 to buy, then you see that whatever I choose, it has to be that I can, so I could get the same extra number of Big Macs per price for hiring a worker as I would get by buying this extra machine. That's what it means to be efficient. If that was not the case, then I should say, for instance, buy fewer machines and hire more workers, or flip it around. I should hire fewer workers and buy more machines. And so this is the idea behind efficiency. And what you can do is just here divided by MPL on both sides and multiply by PK on both sides, and you get this this thing there. That the marginal product of an extra machine divided by the marginal product of an extra worker has to be equal to the price of that machine divided by the price of that worker. Yeah, or the marginal product of a machine in terms of work, a marginal product of worker has to be equal to the price of a machine in terms of the price of a worker. Does that make sense?
Yes.
All right, so a question?
What would be like an example of the marginal product of the machine or the worker?
Yeah, okay, so is there a numerical example after that? Yeah. Okay, so example. One extra worker costs $20, produces 40 extra Big Macs. One extra machine, say cooker or stove, costs 2,000 because it's very expensive, but I can produce much more with it. So produces say 100 extra Big Macs. So should I hire an extra worker or buy this extra stove to minimize costs? The cost of producing my Big Macs. Well, so here I would get that MPK divided by PK would equal to 100 divided by 2,000 equals to 0.05. Thanks. And yeah, so this is here. And for workers, I would get that marginal product of labor divided by the price of labor. So let's just say, yeah, I could say that that's PL, that's, yeah, so that's wage. So note is wage and PK is rent of that extra machine. So we say rent of the machine. So don't ask me why, but yeah, eventually it's rent because either I rent it to somebody or I go to the bank, ask for a loan and have to pay interest rate. And then I can buy this machine. But we always talk about R. So PK is rent of the machine.
So I have a question about this.
Yeah, okay. So I'm just going to finish this. So then the marginal product of the labor would be 40 and the marginal cost would be 20. So then it's going to be 2. So what should I do? Then obviously rent fewer machine and hire more workers. Because I can produce the same amount at lower cost. I can then produce the same amount at lower cost. Okay, so go ahead with your question.
Yeah, when you're looking at cost, for example, a worker, is that like per hour for the $20 and the 2,000 because there's no time variable really. Like for example, buying a stove could last, X amount of years, like 10 plus. But the worker looking at like $20 an hour, it's hard to establish the two because really you should have some sort of time variable to establish which one, how long each one lasts. So how do you look at it?
Okay, so that's exactly, so that's couldn't say it better. That's exactly the why we are talking about rental, because what we always want to say is, yeah. So okay, so no note, yeah. Our costs and products are per hours, for instance. So flows. So yeah, so that's why we like to talk about rent, because it's a flow. It's not saying, okay, I buy one machine initially, and so because I have to think per hour, what would this machine cost me? What would this worker cost me? So I have to have two measures that are per hour. So what we see is the wage rate, the number of Big Macs per hours, the wage rate per hour. So that's $20. So the stoves is 2,000 per hours to rent, and would produce 100 extra Big Macs per hour all the time. So yeah, otherwise, if I say, oh, my extra stove cost me $1 million to buy, then it's very difficult to make a choice. So should I buy initially a stove at $1 million and then, or hire workers with this? So I have to have a way to compare them. So yeah, it's a perfect way, perfect thing to add.
Thanks, that makes sense.
Okay, so it's a good place to end. Yeah, it's a good place to end. So let's say we continue here next time.
Bye.
Last question before we go.
See you, sir.
Okay. See you. Thank you a lot. Yes.
I have some questions about the labs and also chapter 6.
Okay, so yeah, it's something we can discuss in 5 minutes after I finish the class. All right, so thanks everyone, and good luck with the lab. It's sorry we can't change the schedule. That's what it is. And yes, so I'll come back online in 5 minutes to answer your questions. So bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you.